Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I want to talk about ranking F1 seasons in the turbo hybrid era. So it's a video topic that's a little bit lighter, less data heavy for sure than what some of the videos I've been doing recently. And so I just thought, it's something fun to do as this is kind of the end, the last season of this kind of version of the turbo hybrid engines that we've had since 2014. I thought I would rank those seasons in terms of two factors. One is the championship fight. So how good was the championship fight for that season? And second is the racing. This is kind of a combination of how I would say how unpredictable the races were in terms of did you go into a race weekend knowing who was going to win the Grand Prix, or was there at least a bit of uncertainty there? It could also be wheel-to-wheel racing as well, where the race is really processional, where qualifying basically determined the finishing order, with the exception of really strange strategies or things like a freak safety car, that kind of thing. Or was the wheel-to-wheel racing really good, and drivers could follow and they could overtake each other very relatively easily. So it's kind of a combination of those two things. I could have also put like something like drama in here, but that's a little bit more subjective, and I think there would be a lot of recency bias there because some of the earlier seasons, again, they're a bit further back in memory, so again, it's a bit harder to treat those as equally as the more recent seasons. And I haven't really been following F1 at the same level for all the seasons of the turbo hybrid era, so it'd be hard for me to kind of assess that a bit more fairly. So it's just those two factors. So we'll get into this and we'll go in reverse order. I basically just ranked them based on how many I basically gave them a score out of 5 stars, 5 stars being the best score, and then of course 1 or even half a star being the worst possible score. And then I basically just ranked them that way. So first, let's see. First off, the worst season of the turbo hybrid according to my rankings, it's actually 2023, and so. Out of 5 stars, I gave the title fight a 1 out of 5, and the racing I gave a 2.5 out of 5. Now, title fight being a 1 out of 5 should be pretty obvious. Of course, the media tried to hype up Sergio Perez as king of the streets, and he was going to be in this title fight with Verstappen. Although that kind of went away very, very quickly, and basically by even a third of the way through the season, halfway through the season, it was pretty much a near certainty that Verstappen was going to win the title. Now, for the racing itself, I can't rate it that highly, simply because it was basically a foregone conclusion almost every weekend that Verstappen was going to win the race. But there was a bit of variety with who joined him on the podium, and you did have the Ferraris at one point, the Mercedes. Start of the season, Aston was strong. The end of the season, McLaren was strong. So you did have quite a bit of variety in terms of the drivers who did join Verstappen on the podium, and that was honestly a lot more interesting than predicting who was going to win. So again, I can't give it absolutely bottom marks for that. But again, when Verstappen basically dominated us the way he did, I can't rank it that highly either. If I was doing it based on if it was my favorite personal, as a personal preference kind of thing, I think I would rank this season a little bit higher. But just based on how I've done it, it comes out 12th. All right, number 11 is 2015. So title fight, I've given it 2 stars out of 5. Hamilton won this title relatively easily. Of course, it was an Inter Mercedes affair. Rosberg, was in the mix for a good chunk of the season, but he definitely faded down the stretch, and that allowed Hamilton to wrap up the title relatively early. And for the racing, I'm ranking it as worse than 2023, even though you could probably argue the wheel-to-wheel racing was better. There were some individual races that were very, very good, like Austin, I should say, and Hungary as well were races that were very, very good. But this was one the season where the podium was the meme that the podium was Ham, Rosberg, where it was basically Hamilton, Rosberg, and Vettel were basically 90% of the podiums that season. Pretty predictable, and again, more often than not, it was Hamilton ahead of Rosberg, and then Vettel in third. So I can't rate it that high for the racing either, even if with those 2014-2016 cars, turned out they could actually follow and race wheel to wheel much better than anything that we've had basically since then, maybe with the exception of 2022. So 4 out of 4 out of 10 combined for those two star categories. All right, moving on to number 10. I'm going to put number 2020 here. So title fight, I'm basically giving a 1 out of 1 out of 5, essentially for the exact same rationale as 2023. We'd already seen Bottas 2.0 in 2019. We'd already kind of seen what a failure that was. And so for 2020, when it came around to us having, Mercedes being the only team really capable of winning the championship, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that, Hamilton was going to win this title. That being said, for the racing, I am ranking it 3 out of 5 because we did have quite a few really unpredictable, crazy races. I think it being a shortened calendar, we only had 17 races, of course. We had a lot of tracks where we had raced at them for the first time ever, or the first time in a very long time. Imola, Nürburgring, Turkey. I think that helped as well and made it a little bit more exciting for the fan. But that being said, Hamilton won most races. And again, just like 2015, it was a bit of a, Hamilton, Bottas, and Verstappen was basically your default podium. But the thing is that Ferrari, of course, the one benefit of Ferrari falling off massively this season was that there was a lot of unpredictability. If, something happened to one of those three drivers, there was a lot of variability and, diversity in terms of the drivers that we saw on the podium. We saw Stroll on the podium twice. We saw Perez win a race. Gasly won a race. Ricciardo got on the podium. Who else got on the podium? Norris got on the podium in the first race, his first F1 podium. Sainz got on the podium. Ocon. So we had a lot of different drivers on the podium, and that was something that, on top, of course, of, Albon, Leclerc and Vettel, I think. So, of course, you had a lot of different drivers on the podium in that season, and that, again, that kind of raises the rating for the racing part up a little bit. All right, number 9, I'm going to go with 2017. So, 2017 title fight, I'm giving it 2.5 stars out of 5. I think for the title fight, of course, it was, for most of the season, it was a pretty nice fight between Vettel and Hamilton, but Ferrari really, really faded. A combination of things, of course, in the Asian leg of that season. Singapore, Malaysia, Japan basically completely ended the title fight, and, Hamilton won the title a couple of races later in Mexico, I want to say. Racing was not great. It was the first year of the really big white cars, and so the dirty air following was a really big issue. The tires were also very, very fragile, still basically all the way up until 2021, I would say. Tires were very, very fragile, and so dirty air was a really big problem. The racing was not great overall, and again, this was kind of deep in the middle of your Big Three era, where it was basically Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari basically dominated everything, and there was basically no opportunity for really for midfield drivers to get podiums, although Lance Stroll somehow, of all drivers, did manage to get a podium in 2017. All right, moving on to number 8. Number 8, I'm going to go with 2019. So title fight, 1.5 stars, slightly better than 2020, just because Bottas did make the title fight last a little bit longer than 2020. And, he did have a decent start to the season, but really it was kind of the Hamilton show for that entire season. Now, for racing, the reason why I'm rating this a little bit higher is that thanks to Ferrari and their trick engine, it made the second half of the season much more exciting, and there was a lot more variation and unpredictability into who was going to actually win the races. The first half of the season was an absolute disaster on this front. Mercedes won, I think, the first 8 races of the season. And from that metric, you could probably, just that alone, you can probably mark this season down lower. But the second half of the season was actually quite good in terms of, not knowing who was going to win each race. Verstappen got 3 wins, Leclerc got 2 wins, Vettel got a win. You had a couple wins for Bottas in there as well, and of course for Hamilton. So basically, it was really the first third of the season or so was basically really, really poor for the racing. The last third was, honestly, pretty good. In terms of not knowing who's going to win each race. Now, moving on to number 7. Number 7, I'm putting 2018. So for 2018 title fight, I'm going with 2.5 stars. Same rating that I did for 2017, but for the racing, I'm putting it at 3 stars out of 5. I felt like we had slightly better races in 2018 compared to 2017, which is a bit odd because usually it's the first year in the regulation cycle that's a little bit better. We had some really interesting races like Bahrain. You had Coda as well, which was pretty good. German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, of course, is another one. And there were quite a few pretty interesting Grand Prix in there. Monza at Italy. Raikkonen trying to win his first Grand Prix in a long, long time. He did eventually get that last win a little bit later in the year. But you did have, some pretty interesting races there. Ricciardo winning at Monaco, China as well, another one. And so even if the title fight again kind of simmered, just like it had the year before, with this time I think more of the fault being on Vettel than on Ferrari, and it was a fairly comfortable Hamilton win in the end. It was at least, I think, not a terrible season compared to some of the seasons we'd had in this era. Okay, number 6, I'm going to go with 2022. So title fight, I'm going with 1.5 stars because even though Ferrari, they tried their best for about a third of a season to give, and Leclerc to give, Verstappen a title fight, it was pretty clear by mid-season onwards that Verstappen was basically just going to steamroll everyone. That being said, in terms of the racing, the wheel-to-wheel racing was very, very good for basically 2/3 of the season. And then, of course, the technical directive came in, and that really put a stop to that. But that being said, there were some really good races this year. The wheel-to-wheel racing was pretty good, especially on the onset. And you did have some unpredictable results here and there. So I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Maybe that's a little bit generous. Maybe it should be like 3.5. But still, I think, especially in the ground effect eras last 4 years, in terms of racing, I think 2022 is definitely the best of them, just because unfortunately 30 years gotten worse and worse every year. Okay, number 5, I'm going to go with 2024. Title fight, I'm going with 2.5 stars out of 5. Again, this was a season where, for the first, kind of the opposite of what you would normally have. For the first, I would say first third of the season, it looked like Verstappen was just going to destroy everyone again. But then things basically started to fall off a cliff. McLaren became much stronger, and Ferrari also became stronger eventually. And so that kind of blew the title fight wide open, and it kind of allowed that title fight to be a little bit more interesting, even though Norris nor Leclerc never really got the gap anywhere near the point where we've had this past season, 2025, where the title fight was actually interesting, and you can actually talk about realistically about another driver basically taking that title off Verstappen. It was at least a talking point for about half a season or so, and it was really after the Brazilian Grand Prix where Verstappen won, Norris finished 6th, that really sealed the deal. Now, in terms of racing, I'm putting it at 3.5 stars out of 5. Even though the wheel-to-wheel racing was again not great in 2024, it was definitely better than this past season. And also, there was a lot of unpredictability. This had one of the most, multi-race, one of the first seasons in a long, long time where you had something like 7 multi-race winners. So the fact that you had so many different drivers able to win more than one race was something that was pretty special, I think. Something that, probably we're not going to see again for quite a long time. So I think for that alone, I'm giving it 3.5 stars for the racing, even if the wheel-to-wheel racing was, not superb. Okay, number 4, I'm going to go with 2014. Now, for title fight, I'm going with 4 out of 5 stars. This was a title fight that went down to the last race in the season. Again, it was helped slightly by the fact that there was double points for the finale, so the winner got 50 points instead of 25. Luckily, it didn't really change the title fight too much, as Hamilton was in the lead. Rosberg, of course, had reliability problems in that race, and so it kind of left a somewhat undramatic end with Hamilton kind of, stealing the title relatively easily at that Abu Dhabi race. So again, the title fight going down to the wire obviously helps a lot. The fact that it was, a bit like this past season where, the driver who was not in first needed a lot of help to win the title, unlike one other year at least that one we haven't talked about yet, means that it doesn't get to be, higher than 4 out of 5 stars. And also the fact that it was between 2 teammates and not an inter-team championship fight, I think also hurts it a little bit. Now for racing, I'm only doing 2.5 stars. Yes, there was pretty good wheel-to-wheel racing in 2014, especially compared to what we've seen recently. But this was an era where Mercedes basically destroyed everyone, and it was almost a guaranteed Mercedes win unless they messed up, which they managed to do a couple times that year, whether through contact like we saw in Belgium or reliability problems like we saw in Canada with their brake issues, which allowed Daniel Ricciardo to, of course, get his first career win. So I can't rate it that high for the racing just because it was pretty predictable in terms of the fact that it was always going to be a Mercedes winning. But the title fight was decent. It wasn't a terrible start to the turbo hybrid era in that regard. Now, number 3, I'm going to go with 2025. Title fight, I'm going with 4.5 stars out of 5. Generally, it was a pretty good title fight. Of course, for most of the season, we thought it was just going to be Norris versus Piastri. They were relatively closely matched the entire season. And of course, Verstappen then somehow magically joined that fight in the last third of the season. That made it added a really interesting dynamic and interesting wrinkle. And so I think in terms of title fight, this was really, really good. I think it would have been held by if Abu Dhabi had been a winner-take-all scenario. That's really the only blemish I can say. And I think the lack of animosity, I think if you wanted to say that animosity would be a good thing for a title fight, I think things like the pile rules probably took away from the title fight a little bit, and I think drew the ire of quite a few people. But that being said, it was overall a very, very good season in that regard. Racing, I'm only going to give it a 2 out of 5. A lot of processional races where qualifying really dictated where you finished. Strategy, again, did become a factor at points, but the fact is that, through the year was a big problem, and that made wheel-to-wheel racing very, very difficult. Now, number 2, I'm going to go with 2016 title fight. Again, I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. About the same level as this past season. Pretty dramatic, a lot of animosity there between Rosberg and Hamilton, and you had a pretty tense title fighter where Hamilton basically tried to back Rosberg up into a bunch of drivers, including Vettel and Verstappen. So, but I'm not giving it 5 stars. Of course, reserving that 5-star rating for title fight for one season in particular. Wheel-to-wheel, in terms of the racing, same situation as 2014, a little bit too predictable in terms of the fact that it was basically almost guaranteed to be a Mercedes win for this pretty much the entire season. Red Bull did get a couple wins here and there. I think they got 2 wins in total. Of course, Spain and Malaysia. But so I can't really rate the racing too high. You did get a little bit of variation in terms of podiums. You had good races, battles between the Ferraris and Red Bulls to see who would join the Mercedes on the podium, but for the most part, racing not great, even though you do have some very, very good races, some classics in there, such as Brazil. Now, number 1, I think most people would know that this would be coming. And number 1, I'm going to put 2021. So title fight, I'm going with the full 5 stars out of 5. It was very intense. Went down to the wire, went down to the final lap of the race, regardless of how you feel about whether that should have happened or not. And so I think you really can't give it anything other than 5 stars for the title fight. Racing, even though the wheel-to-wheel racing was, I think, not amazing, like it was okay, I think the fact is that you basically went into every race knowing that it was going to be a really intense fight between Verstappen and Hamilton, that likely one of the two of them were going to win, but you were never really exactly sure which one of them would. And so you did have some very, very interesting strategic races throughout the season. You had some good wheel-to-wheel racing. You also had some very dodgy wheel-to-wheel racing. Silverstone, Monza, Saudi Arabia definitely come to mind. And so I think even if the wheel-to-wheel aspect was not as good as, say, a season like 2012, just the fact that you had this really intense nature there. And again, you had this, dynamic where basically Verstappen and Hamilton basically won almost every race. That, unpredictability, not knowing who is exactly going to come out on top each week, I think that lended itself to a good racing in a way. So for me, 2021 is still the best season in the turbo hybrid era. Overall, 2025 I think was a good season, definitely in the top half, and Verstappen basically making the title fight more interesting, but I think unfortunately the lack of good wheel-to-wheel racing and good races overall meant that I can't really rate it that much higher. So that's all for my review. I guess not even a review, just my ranking of the 12 seasons of the turbo hybrid era. Again, as this era comes to a close and we start a new era afresh in 2026. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.